Give everybody in the room some tips on what makes an effective committee chair, how to really build on that committee chair and staff partnership, and hear from some of the experts at CTF. We have a great panel today. We have 3 virtual, and they are here on Zoom, and 3 right here in the room. Arby Harrison, who is one of our CTF board members, Liz Rodbell, who's also a board member. Arby is remote. McKinnon Callaway, who started the junior board here in person. Scott Saxe, who is a board chair for the national level and local level for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society in many capacities. Nicole Dimazos, who is remote, and she is the chair for the Charlotte Walk, the Carolinas Walk, and then Diane Owens, who has done a number of things for CTF on the NFE side and most recently chaired our NFE task force. So to get started, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to ask each of the panelists to reintroduce themselves more formally with their role within CTF, but then additionally to provide a few words to describe the characteristics of a good committee chair. So let me actually start with the remote folks. We can give them a chance to talk. I'll start with Arby.
Hey, good afternoon all. Thank you for attending. I'm Arby Harrison. I'm a board member of CTF. I also serve as the secretary of the board. I serve on a number of committees. The one of relevance here was I co-chaired the NF2 Accelerator. I am an NF2 dad with an 18-year-old son who was diagnosed 7 years ago. And what I think makes a good committee chair is someone who is organized, collaborative, passionate, and ultimately sets nice, clear objectives. They set expectations, they follow up, and then they delegate. So I think many of you will have all those qualities, and look forward to any questions you might have at the end.
Nicole.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicole Dimazos. I am the chair of our Carolina Shine a Light Walk. This will be our second year that we're having the walk in person. So my second year chairing it. And I am a mother to a daughter, Annabelle, who just turned 3 years old, and she was diagnosed with NF1 when she was about 6 months old. So obviously very passionate about the cause and very happy to be a part of the walk here in the Carolinas. I think, Arby stole some of my words there, but certainly organized and dedicated, I think makes a good chair. To be honest, I didn't have a lot of experience coming into this, relying on the CTF staff members to help guide me. But I think if you can kind of keep everything organized as well as have a passion for it and be dedicated for it, it'll fall in place. So that's my tidbit of advice related to that.
Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Saxe, and I am not on any committee for CTF, but happy to be here today volunteering and helping out. I do chair a handful of boards on organizations, large and small, mostly in the health arena, but certainly been involved in some other organizations as well. I also consult with organizations on board development. So this is kind of right up my alley for me. And, it's hard to follow, RB and Nicole, with all these things. I think we're all going to say about the same things, right? A good board leader, chair is strategic. They're organized, they're respectful, they're communicative, and they hold people accountable and drive the mission forward. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And now I'll go to our in-person panelists. McKinnon, why don't we start with you?
Perfect. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Hey, my name is McKinnon Callaway, and I have NF2. I was the co-chair and chair of the Children's Tumor Foundation Junior Board, and I am currently newly deaf. So if I speak too loud, I'm really sorry. But for a good committee chair, I would just say passion is really important for good energy, and kind of like what everybody else said of just, good commitment and looking for strengths in your committee and really being respectful towards your committee and really helping out and also giving them tasks and deadlines and holding them accountable.
Liz?
I'm Liz Rodbell. I'm happy to be here. And I want to add something else to McKinnon's roster of many things. She was also an ambassador and raised a tremendous amount of funds for the Children's Tumor Foundation. So she's been a tremendous advocate. So, yes, well, you more than deserve it. So I am on the board, Children's Tumor Foundation board. I also serve as a co-chair of our annual benefit, and I've done that for the last 4 years, and it's an honor and a pleasure to give service. I got involved with the Children's Tumor Foundation because my daughter was diagnosed with NF1 when she was 9. She is now 23. And our mission really started through her, of her identifying her illness, having cancer, and then saying, I want to make a difference and I want to hopefully find a cure. So she began a journey of fundraising and really being a part of this community. And I kind of followed her in. And then as a family, we became very engaged and involved. So it's really been a great experience for all of us. My family's somewhere here in the building. And, you know, as far as being a good co-chair, I've been on other chairmanships at other fundraising in the industry that I come from, which is fashion. And really, I think a motivation to win and really having tremendous passion about what you're looking to accomplish are super important. And then I think what was said about really setting clear goals and surrounding yourself with people on your committee that really fulfill, because you're not going to know everything. And many people are going to be much more skilled at many areas of what you're trying to accomplish, and really give them the space to do that really has been part of what has, I think, helped us accomplish everything with Michele and in many other experiences I've had. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm Diane Owens. Oh, is this on?
Yes.
Is this mic on? My name is Diane Owens. I've been involved with the Children's Tumor Foundation as a volunteer for 8 years. I have a son who is 9 years old who has NF1. I've mostly been involved with the NF Endurance, NFE teams. I recently I'm leading the NFE task force, but I've also been involved in managing some community events. I've joined the Volunteer Leadership Task Force, and I've also petitioned our state representatives both on the Hill and within our state. So from my perspective, being a leader on a committee, being a community, I can't speak today.
You'll do it. You'll get it out.
Maybe I should have had a little cocktail before this, Michele. I don't know. Nerves are on edge.
5:30.
Yeah.
Just a few more hours for that.
I think what's important in being a chair in any board, being a leader in any way, there's 3 key principles really. The first is to speak fearlessly. Try to speak better than I'm speaking today, but speak without fear, whether it's your story, whether it's your plight, whether it's your history. The second is to be comfortable in the silence. So whether you're trying to convince a senator to support legislature, or whether you're trying to convince an athlete to run a race or a friend to donate $20, you need to be able to speak to them honestly and meet them where they are, and then be comfortable in the silence. Let it sit, let them think, respond when you can. And then when they're ready to answer your question, listen without bias. Don't assume you know where they're coming from. Don't assume you know what they're thinking. Just listen.
Thank you. So we did a little prep. So I'm going to ask the panelists some questions, but please, if any of you have a question in the room, just raise your hand. Lydia in the back is there with a microphone, and certainly we can stop at any moment in time. I'm actually going to start with Arby and Nicole. In some of our prep, we talked about, you know, how do you actually build a committee, right? So where do you go if you're a chair, or somebody on the staff says you would make a great chair, like let's build a committee. So Arby and Nicole, how do you go about identifying the skill set needed for committee members?
So I'm
Nicole, you
assuming,
want to go first?
go ahead, Arby.
No, go ahead, Nicole. Ladies
I was
first.
going to say, I'm assuming Rebecca gave you that question because that's kind of exactly what happened to me. So, last year, Rebecca Taylor from CTF came to me and kind of just encouraged me to step up and take on the leadership role. To be honest, I was pretty hesitant for it, but she encouraged me and told me that we would have a great team to support with. So to be honest, I relied heavily on Rebecca initially, the CTF staff to help support that. We had some engaged team members or volunteers already that we were able to rely on. But I think, even within the last 12 months, 18 months that we've been driving it out, continue to grow that. So it's a passion of mine to find others in my community that are going through the same thing that I've gone through with my daughter and kind of build up the community. So the walk was more than just, one day event for us to get together and raise funds. It was really to build a community. So was able to rely on the diverse volunteers that we already had based on Rebecca's interactions with the team members, and then really rely on the strengths that they brought to the table. So it kind of organically came to light of, through our conversations, through our planning meetings, what their interest and what their strengths were. And I think really kind of just capitalizing on that and utilizing what their strengths that they brought to the table were. And then I think as the chair, picking up, the slack on some of the things that might not be some of the team members' strengths. So I think that's how we kind of have had a successful committee and kind of continue to build it, honestly, just organically through the members that we're getting as part of the committee.
So that's a tough act to follow. A couple things I might add is to step back and think about the major tasks the committee is going to have to accomplish. Are you going to have a social media presence? Then you have to seek out somebody who knows social media. That would not be me as an example. Or you need organizational skills, people with good project management skills, and identify players who would have that for you. I have always found, similar to Nicole, asking people who have preceded me and what they've accomplished, I learn a lot as to how you build good teams. I also would say the CTF staff can be exceptional in terms of pointing you in directions of where you can pick up talents and skills. I think the important aspect is to balance the skills that you're looking for and the people that you have so that you cover the activities that you need to get done. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's one of the most important things of how to do it.
Yeah. And if I could jump in on that too, Arby, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, right? I mean, you both of you capitalizing the strengths, right? You have to know what the team is and capitalize on those strengths, but you also have to, be able to identify the weaknesses that are there and fill those gaps too, right? I mean, if everybody is really good at one thing and there's several things that need to be done, it doesn't necessarily help drive that forward. And I think, that never being afraid to ask for help is great. And I think helping your committee members understand that as well, because our universe, right, as chairs is this much, right? We know so many people, but if you look at all the people on the committee, I mean, our reach is exponentially greater. So having them help identify some people as well helps fill in those gaps and make that committee even stronger.
Thanks, Scott. Arby, I want to go back to you for a second because you sort of referenced it and you mentioned it in the very beginning, which is the importance of setting expectations. Can you talk to that? How important is it to set expectations for the committee? And then, of course, anybody else on the panel who would like to talk to that. We'd love your input as well.
I actually think that's one of the most critical things that a committee chair has to do. I mean, your objective is going to come down from high. You know that you're trying to organize a walk. You know that you're trying to organize a special event. But the trick for the chair then is to break that down into what I would call tasks or expectations. And the idea then should be, in a collaborative way, getting assignment of those tasks out to your team so you can delegate to them, because you're not going to be able to do it all. Clearly communicate and build a time and action calendar of when things need to be done and who's going to do them. And then your role as the leader is to follow up on that. Not in a micromanaging ways, because you want to give your team space. You may not even be asking or working with them of how to do it, but you want to be able to touch base and follow up and make sure that you're tracking to where you want to be. And if you are tracking, great. If there's some issue that you're not comfortable going to get done, what do you do to remediate it? Do you work with that subcommittee and understand, was the timeline too tight? Do they not have the resources? But then as the chair, how do you then get it back on track while relying on the team to participate in all that process? The one thing I would say that I find very critical, and a number of people commented, is to do that in a respectful way. But in the end of the day, as the chair, you're responsible to get this done. So you do have to make people accountable for what they're doing, as long as it was a reasonable task to do.
And I'd like to just add a little bit to reinforce that. What I've found on the committees that I have led is that whatever your goals are, you will set intermittent meetings for the committee to get together. But those check-ins in the interim to make sure that things are proceeding, or there are questions, probing for understanding and following up, is the whole other part of being a chair or a co-chair. And that process of consistent communication, whether it's, clarity or maybe redirecting some energy, has really been helpful to me to meet the goals that I've been looking for.
So now that we're sort of talking about setting expectations, then there is the expectation that people on the committee and the staff as well, that we're accountable to each other. So I'm going to ask Scott and Diane, who had some great insight on this. How do you hold your committee members accountable?
So I think it does go back to the expectations. So if you've clearly set what you're expecting to have from your committee and your task members and your volunteers, then it's really a matter of just following up on that. And again, it goes back to the speaking fearlessly. You need to give credit where it's due, give accolades and recognition where it's due. And when things are falling short, you can't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. If a committee member's not meeting your expectations, or they're not fulfilling what they've committed to do for you, you need to be able to not be afraid of offending that person or losing them on your committee, and have a very honest and pure conversation to understand where are they coming from. I think I learned something a long time ago in business, that if you always assume the person you're speaking to is coming from a good place, it drives the conversation to a productive place. So if you approach it from that end, you can usually get what you need, or you redirect, right? Nothing's carved in stone.
Thank you.
Well, I'll add to that just by saying that I think you're right. I mean, you have to certainly set expectations, right? You have to be clear in what those expectations are, and understanding, those responsibilities and what the outcomes are that we're looking for. But beyond that is not just holding accountable, but kind of measuring that too, right? And providing feedback throughout the process. We don't go from, A to Z without all the steps in between. So communicating as best we can. And it really, to some extent, probably depends on the committee, or board's responsibilities and what outcomes we're looking for. On boards, I usually, give out report cards halfway through the year. So, we set expectations early on in the fiscal year and look at, okay, what, as a board member, here's your responsibilities, and here, turn around and what are the expectations you have from us and we from you? How many meetings do you attend? What events do you participate in? What's your giving look like? All the things that we can measure against. And then at some point in the year, looking at it actually showing where their progress is, not just against themselves, but against the rest of the board as well, which kind of helps spur motivation usually, and continuing that communication and those conversations. People who are underperforming, it happens for a variety of reasons. And sometimes it's a capability capacity issue. And sometimes, sometimes that comparison to the rest of the board lifts them up. And in other times, it also puts them in a place where they recognize that, you know what, maybe I bit off more than I can chew, and they'll talk about taking a step back. And so I think it's a matter of setting those expectations, measuring them, keeping those lines of communication open always. And I heard this a couple times now, but recognizing that, we all have other things on our plate, and there's a lot going on, and making sure that we're respectful of everybody's time and other responsibilities, not just what they're doing on that committee.
That's a great point. I think, in its core, it's all about not just setting the expectations, but you have to build a very genuine relationship with the people you're working with, so that if something does come up and they do have a challenge, they're not afraid to come talk to you about it. If they feel that something's happened that's unfair, that it's not even on your radar, you want your committee to be able to trust you and come to you so that they can also speak fearlessly.
So, McKinnon and Liz, I'm going to ask you a little bit. I'm going to ask you to talk about the importance of the staff and the chair and that partnership, and why that's so important and what we can do to continue to strengthen that.
Should I go first?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as I said before, I was the co-chair and chair of the junior board, and I just think that, we were a young board when we first started, and we're still learning how to navigate a lot of first. How asking donors how to donate, how to manage expectations, how to organize events, how to be a team leader, team player. And I think the staff is a wonderful resource to help guide and mentor us on many firsts, which has been really, really useful to us, is like just an extra person to kind of lean on, to understand and navigate when we're in kind of like dark waters. It's been just a great, incredible resource for us how to get through that stuff and really help improve a lot of our events and relationships.
To add to the relationship, and certainly I spend a lot of time with Michele, is what I've learned over the years is, and remember all the time, is her goals are the same as mine. And I'm using it as a her because she's my primary partner in the benefit for Children's Tumor Foundation. But in any chair position that I've had, there's a key staff person that you tend to be aligned with, and our goals are aligned. And I would highly recommend to anybody to not be shy, because certainly the staff at the Children's Tumor Foundation wants to help us win. And always, I've never had a time where I didn't get a phone call back, I didn't get a good answer, I didn't get a, let me get back to you with an answer, or this is the right person. So the support system is broad. And so I would say the first thing is to not be shy. And then also that the guidance and insights that McKinnon mentioned are beyond measure. And so we have an expanded world by working together and really being a team and not feeling like we as volunteers have to do it independently. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to be working on anything for Children's Tumor Foundation, to get your claws into your partner and build that relationship, because it's really, and you and I worked on an event recently, and you did a great job, Barb. So anyway, we're here to support each other to meet our goals. And if we look at it that way, I think we get a better result.
I just want to add something that came up in one of the other sessions. I think it was our lunch and learn, and there's sort of themes that are happening throughout. Is it's really okay to have those difficult discussions, because you as a staff person and your chair may not always agree. Tracy Galloway is our board chair, and she can tell you there are times that she and I probably don't agree, but it's really important and to have that difficult conversation with your volunteer and the staff partner. Volunteers shouldn't be afraid to do that, right? Because that has to happen if we're going to grow together and we're going to make things work. And again, and the staff we've got to hold each other accountable on that side of it. So, and I can't tell you how many difficult conversations I've probably had with many of the volunteers who are in this room. So, and it's helped. We want that open, honest relationship, because as an organization, we want to grow. And we're only going to do that from listening to the people who've been the boots on the ground and who are really making things work. We're not the experts, right? We're together, we're the experts, and I think we all have to remember that.
I'm really glad. I'm sorry, I'm really glad you said that because I was before you did, I was going to jump in with kind of a similar theme, is that, you know, it was Diane, I think earlier, who spoke about, you know, speaking fearlessly, and that's true, but speaking authentically as well, right? I mean, if you've, as a board chair, committee chair, if you've got those concerns, if you have questions, if there's something that you're not in alignment with, speak about that. I mean, you have to have those respectful, authentic conversations with staff, because, you know, to your point, those partnerships are incredibly important, and you have to be aligned. You may not start out that way, but you have to get there. And the same then becomes true as chair of having those conversations with your committee members as well, right? They have to feel that same comfort and respect that they can speak to you authentically and share those concerns, and making sure that what they're seeing in the field is aligned with, you know, those goals as well. So those lines of communication always have to be there. They always have to be open. And, you know, at some point, right, you build consensus around that. There's not always that beautiful, you know, symbiosis of agreement, but you build consensus and you drive it forward.
So the one thing I want to add, because Scott hit a lot of what I thought was going to be an important point, is don't be shy about asking questions both ways. The staff has a tremendous amount of expertise in what they do, but you as a committee chair, you bring an outside perspective in many cases. You may be affected, or you have family members that are affected, so that you can have a perspective. You have your professional career, your personal life. There are likely many skills that can be combined in a creative manner that can make your overall ability to get this done much more effective. I think that partnership that Scott mentioned is the important thing. But remember, as a committee or a board chair, you're bringing something to that partnership too.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else on the panel want to add before we move on? So I have two more questions for the panel, and then we can open it up. So we're going to get to the fearless question, because it's come up time after time after time. But something that came up in our pre-session was the difference between empowerment and engagement. And I think that is really important. And Scott, you kind of led with this, and I was really struck by it, because there is a difference between just engaging somebody on a committee or a committee chair and then empowering them to really do. And so I thought maybe you could start, and then Diane, if you want to add in, and other members of the panel, maybe Nicole too, to add to that.
Sure. And you know, look, just in listening to this group here, I think there's a lot of engagement, right? And I'm guessing it's happening in the live audience too. That, I mean, it sounds like a lot of the people who are involved here, they have a direct connection to the mission. They've got family members. You know, engagement in a voluntary health organization like this is usually, I hate to say easy, but it's easy, because we have a tie to this mission. We want to be engaged. We want to do something. We want to drive things forward. So engaging with people is relatively easy. You get this pool that you can pull from and get them on committees and get them to be involved and to do more. But really empowering volunteers is something that most organizations struggle with, right? You know, we say we're looking to have somebody chair a committee for this walk. Here's what we do. Here's when we're doing it. Go and do it. And like, that's kind of the end. And they expect the volunteers to kind of just take the mantle and run, which is great. And there's success in that. The most successful organizations I've seen are the ones who really empower volunteers. And we were just talking about this, right? It's the lines of communication are open, that there's that feedback. And not only is there the comfort in talking to staff about something that they see differently, you know, in the field, but knowing that the staff is open to those conversations and suggestions, and will actually, depending on what that is, make change. And maybe it's changed to an event, maybe it's adding a new event, maybe it's doing something completely different than we've ever done before. But those tools of empowerment to really allow the volunteers to feel that they're not just there to serve, but to really give back in a whole different, meaningful way, and, you know, to open up their ideas as some of the things that can drive the organization forward. That it winds up being kind of, you know, volunteer led much more than just, you know, volunteer driven, and it's a whole different level of engagement There's a company I work with. I'm in the Chicago area. There's a company that I've worked with here in my hometown who's in the catering world, and their founder has talked about a lot about employee engagement in a way that they call it entanglement. Right? It's beyond just being engaged in any one thing. It's every employee, whether they're the ones who sweep the floor, they drive the trucks, they make the food, they do the financials. Everybody's kind of really in tune to what the organization is doing or to what the company is doing. And I think that's where I get a lot of this empowerment piece in the volunteer world, is that everybody's got some role to play and some responsibility, and we all have some expertise that we can bring to the table. And if the organization and the committee chairs are open to those things, it's a much more powerful reaction that we get, the more we can really let people shine.
Nicole, do you want to add anything to that? And then I'll ask Diane, because you had a lot of comments on this too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with what Scott had said there. And I think, again, kudos to Rebecca, because I feel like she really did empower me to help lead that for our walk. And, you know, we were a new walk in the area. So, I mean, organically, again, it was just inherent that everybody on the committee chair brought ideas to the table, and we implemented, you know, some of everybody's ideas. We were a new walk and we were able to do that, but I would just encourage even existing committees that have been in place, you know, encouraging and empowering, you know, the volunteers to help provide those ideas, because there's always something new and fresh that can be added. And I think that will then ultimately kind of pay it forward tenfold, with those volunteers feeling empowered and more engaged and just energized to help and do more.
Awesome. Thank you. Diane.
So for me, the difference between engagement and empowerment is the end goal. So the end goal of engagement is to get participation. It's to get people to show up. The end goal of empowerment is to make sure that those people who showed up have the knowledge, the resources, the permission to be successful, to drive things forward, and if they choose to become leaders themselves. So we need both, because you can't empower if no one's there to be engaged.
So I'm going to ask everyone, so I may be throwing a few people under the bus here because they didn't know they were going to be asked this question, but we spoke a lot about being fearless on our prep call, and Diane, you brought this up. So I'd like everybody on the panel to actually talk a little bit about what that means to them specifically.
Way to throw me a curveball there. So a fearless, I like saying speaking fearlessly, because as committee chairs, I always feel like we're talking, right? Whether we're talking to a group or an individual or whatever the case may be. So, and that speech can differ. If anyone heard the marketing presentation earlier, we were talking about the elevator speeches, right? And we've got 3 different sort of tiers of details that you go through, and as a volunteer we do that a lot. But I think back to as a committee chair, we are the bridge between, in our case, CTF and whatever our committee is, whether it's a walk or a race or whatever, and we need to be able to speak honestly and without fear of repercussions to both the volunteer side, so that they can be successful in whatever they're doing, their fundraising, their whatever, and CTF, so that they can find us a cure. If we're afraid to tell our story, if we're afraid to have those difficult conversations like Michele and Tracy were talking about earlier, we're basically failing ourselves and each other. So I think a lot of times we have to come out of our comfort zones and say things we might not want to share in order to achieve the larger goal.
Liz, any thoughts on being fearless as a committee chair?
Well, I think that it goes without saying that there has to be a very high level of self-confidence to take a position, because you might have been a committee member and now you're looked on as taking on a new role as chair, or you've chosen to really say, I really want to lead something. So that is that aspect of taking your self-confidence into that next level of making sure that you probe further to make sure everybody is on the same page. And if they're not, why? and then fearlessly say, this is where we're going. Because if you're going a little bit sideways, you've still got to get your group to meet the end goal. So sometimes that takes some challenging conversations. And I have found that, and we talked a little bit this on our call, is that those side check-ins, those side communications, those one-on-one talks to take your committee along with you, or maybe, challenge, because maybe there is a different idea than what you were thinking, work together and fearlessly move forward as a team, because it's really meant to be a team. But of course, keeping that passion to win, which our win is ending NF. And if we keep keeping that in our mindset and fearlessly go after that, then we're going to win.
McKinnon?
Okay. Okay, well, first I'd like to say that me and fear are best friends. I'm about to go through my 4th brain surgery, so I think that, that's something that's really taught me a lot, and it kind of parallels to me being a leader and kind of co-chair, or the past co-chair of the Children's Tumor Foundation is, it's kind of the Michael Jordan saying, if you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like, I'm currently afraid sitting up here talking for the first time being deaf, but because I put myself out there time and time and time again, it's scary sharing your story. It's everybody's afraid. Like, you're not alone. And I think that's what people need to realize, is that, like, with fear, being fearless is doing it anyways, is being afraid but doing it anyways. Like, everybody's scared to share their story. Like, everybody is scared to take that risk to start that committee. Like, everybody's scared to join that organization. Like, I have a huge fear of failure. I remember when Stuart Sunak came up with the idea of the junior board and Michele and I decided to run with it. I was like, what if nobody joins? I was like, because I had a huge fear of failure, and I still do. But I think that's something that you kind of learn, is that with anything, everybody's afraid, but you just got to do it anyways. And I think that's really what fearless means to me.
And we have a number of junior board members here today. Also in this room, we have the 2 new co-chairs, Rose Matsuda and Corey Altman. So welcome. Before we have the online panel answer that question, I was thinking about this. Many of you all know Mark Early, who isn't here, but he and his wife put on an annual golf outing, and they have a son, Joe, who has NF. And Joe has a big tattoo on his arm that says NF and no fear. And in fact, like, that really is, like, NF means no fear. You have to be fearless. And because NF is something that we all have to fight and find new treatments for. We all have to have no fear in taking and being leaders for the organization.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I love that.
Right?
NF
We
is
should
no
all
fear.
have
Where's
tattoos
Simon?
that say no
Simon,
fear.
Alyssa?
You notice they stepped out right at an
did.
opportune
That's a
moment.
good
Oh,
moment.
right?
We'll
Somebody
corner
gotta
them.
text them. Can somebody text them for us? We got a new T-shirt. Yeah, it's all right. I could be both.
All right, so Arby, Nicole, and Scott, talk about what being fearless means to you when it comes to being a leader and a committee chair.
So I can start. I mean, I think everything that's been said is totally accurate. The piece I would add is the aspect of leadership that in the end, you have the decision rights. But in order to build alignment, you really need to listen to the team first. They're always going to know you're the committee chair. You don't have to speak first, because you could potentially color the direction of the entire conversation and won't be able to have a frank discussion, an open discussion of the possibilities. And I think that's the way you get a greater alignment and you get new ideas on the table. The other thing that I would add is the power of vulnerability, of putting yourself out there as a leader. I mean, I always ended any review I did, or in some cases started a performance review I did, is how am I doing? Because I wanted feedback. You need to have the feedback, and if you are open to it, the worst thing you can do if you're trying to build alignment is react badly to somebody else's idea. It may not be the right idea, but you can't just say, boy, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. You got to talk that through a little bit and be able to explain yourself. If you get a person aligned to your idea because it's the right thing, you're going to have a much more empowered and effective team versus brute force, which is not going to get you anywhere. So that aspect of being open to feedback, taking it well, and then in turn being able to provide it frankly so that you can get alignment, I think is the aspect of how fearless can move you ahead faster.
Nicole and then Scott.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'll just add to that. I think, similar to McKinnon, certainly had fear going into taking on, a leadership role as being the committee chair. What about if nobody shows up? What happens if there's two people at the walk but I think just overcoming that and knowing, what the end goal is and the cause is so personal to me. I think Arby, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, sharing your story not only helps you and your family members, but it's tenfold. So you tell your story and someone else hears it. I know McKinnon was a huge fundraiser for us in the Carolinas, and she told her story, put it out there, and I thanked her because that's helping my daughter. It's not only helping her bring awareness to NF, but it's helping all of us. So,
Scott.
Well, I agree with everybody. I do, but I'll take a slightly different approach maybe in this too. So, I said it a little earlier as well, but I certainly believe in that speaking fearlessly. But I think two things that go along with that are speaking authentically and respectfully as well, right? Too many people get caught up in the speaking their mind and not really thinking about what the audience is and what's right for that. So I think they all go hand in hand. And I think part of that too is it depends on who and where and how we're talking, right? If we're engaging our committees, it's a different type of fearless, to RB's point of, it's not the Scott show or the RB show. We want to hear from the rest of the group. We're trying to build consensus and not necessarily steer the conversation. If we're speaking to a legislator, we may, we certainly want to be fearless in that, but our ask is different and the interaction is different. Same thing with potentially speaking to our staff partners, right? Those are very different conversations, but I think we can have all of them in that fearless, respectful, authentic mode. And the other side of that, and Diane brought this up earlier, is the listening, right? Being comfortable in that silence. I've always talked about listening to learn and not listening to respond, which is something I had to train myself for because I'm a natural. You're talking, I'm coming up with my response already. So I think really listening to learn from that, and the hope is somebody speaking to me fearlessly as well, and being comfortable in that silence, but also being comfortable in engaging your committee and pulling things out of members. The thing I hate the most in a meeting of any type is complete silence where nobody's speaking, fearlessly or not. And I think this all just goes back to one thing I started with when we were doing introductions, is really knowing your board, right? Communicating with them, not just in meetings, but really getting to know the composition of who your members are and what they're doing. And it goes back to that empowerment thing. If we allow everybody to really speak fearlessly, it becomes a better experience for everybody.
So we have a little bit of time left. I think we have about 10 minutes left. This was a full hour session. Does anybody have questions in the audience? Anybody struggling with anything as a committee chair or a leader that they'd like to ask of our panelists? So if not, I have one last question then, which is one piece of advice to everybody in the room who's either embarking on being a committee chair or, just anything that you've learned outside or anything else that you want to add that we haven't actually touched on. I'll start with Diane. She's looking at me like, what?
I'm like, that wasn't on the email. My one piece of advice is be a chameleon. Did that just go through, McKinnon? I'm funny, right? Be a chameleon. Wherever you go, whatever you do, and this goes back to what Scott was saying earlier. I actually wrote it down because I wanted to reinforce it, is knowing your audience. So whether you are a committee chair for a golf tournament, whether you're leading a group of your friends as a team lead in an endurance race, whether you are putting your child up as an NF endurance hero for a premier race of 50 athletes you've never met before, go in there and know that you belong.
Liz?
So one thing that maybe we didn't talk that much about is I think it's so important that you have those human connections on your committee. And as chair, building those relationships in and outside of the more formal work really has helped to have those dialogues and improve the quality of the work that I've done. And the other side of one thing I wanted to add is adding newness into your committees as time goes on, because if you stay the same group, you tend to have the same ideas. And to truly get new ideas and connect new people in, it can only advance your goals. So I think that would be something I'd like to add.
McKinnon, any words of advice for everybody in the room?
Sorry, it's catching up. I just want to reiterate what Scott said earlier. I mean, I really think, listening and not listening to reply, I think that's really important, even though I was definitely listening to reply for his comment. But I definitely think that truly listening and being authentic and kind of, as Liz mentioned, like get to know them as people is really, really important to establish that trust. And another thing of the being fearless, and you're taking that step, as Michele mentioned, what if 2 people show up? Well, you know what, like, you making a difference to those 2 people, that could lead to another donor or changing those lives of those 2 people, and that makes a huge impact. That could save a family, or that could save a child. Like, just because it's 2 people doesn't mean it's not worth it. Whereas you could have stand beside and done nothing, and these families could have been at such a loss. So you are helping. It doesn't matter if 1 person shows up or 1,000. I mean, I will say that Nicole really helped with our walk, and the North Carolina walk. She was like a firecracker. We had because I was nervous with the new walk. I was like, is anybody going to show up? And we had like hundreds of people show up, and I was like, wow, okay, she did a great job. But if 1 or 1,000 show up, you are making a difference. So don't be afraid. Just, you have to get out there and take that step and do it.
Great advice. Well, Nicole, I'm going to put you on the spot to give any last piece of advice to the group.
Yeah, I'll just say, maybe reflecting back, because I think we talked a lot about, speaking fearlessly and some of the reservations that we may have had, or some of the fears that we had to overcome to take on a leadership role. But reflecting, and to McKinnon's point, looking back and seeing the impact that you help make, whether that be 2 people or 100 people, it's really important work. And I think, we're always thinking about the next walk or, the next task that we have to do, but maybe taking a step back and, really reflecting on your hard work and what you've brought to the committee, and how many people that's impacted, because we're all in this together for, our kids and our families.
Arby, any last words of advice to the group? Oh, you're muted.
Arby,
you're muted.
All right, my bad.
Take 2.
That was brilliant. What I really wanted to do start with is thank you. All of you to show up as committee leads or committee members or folks who are interested in ending NF are really what is going to get this done. So don't forget that. You will make a difference in what you're doing. And when you do get scared, ask for help. There are people who have done all this before, either staff members or other volunteers. And as Nicole said, we're all in this together, and we all want to make NF go away. So you will have lots of help. Don't be afraid to ask.
Scott.
Well, how do you follow all of that? So I've got I've got 2 different pieces of advice here. And it's really for 2 different audiences, perhaps, right? So the first is, for everybody who is listening, who is already a chair, look, there was a lot of great advice in this session today, right? So take this advice, take the feedback, do some reflection, ask questions of yourselves, of your committees, of your staff partners, of whoever. But the most important thing a chair can do is prepare for their successor, right? Bringing in the next person who's going to lead this committee and to make sure that they had the same success that you did. And there's a world, it sounds like, of support for everybody on any of these CTF committees. The second is for people who are not a chair today, right? And maybe not even volunteering on a committee, but for everybody who's in this audience, you obviously have some desire maybe to understand how to be a more effective chair. If you're not, raise your hand. I mean, be part of this, right? There are a lot of people who volunteer. There's very few people who volunteer to lead. And so if you're thinking about doing it, the organization needs your help, the families need your help, the mission needs your help. And so there's a world of support here between volunteers and staff and everybody else who can help make this job easier. And so if you're on the fence, if it's something you're thinking about, I mean, you don't go from zero to committee chair just by putting your hand up in the air. You'll get there, but do it. Go fearlessly into this, because you'll be successful with the team around you.
All right, well, I want to thank our panel. It's been a lot of fun for me to put this together, and I think we have a completely new tagline, which is no fear, and I think that's really been a theme that we've heard left and right here. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you'll stay for the next session. Pam Swank, who is a guest speaker. She is absolutely amazing and wonderful, and I've known her for over 20 years. I knew her from Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and she is a tremendous leader and consultant in the nonprofit world. And she's going to be talking about making lifetime donors. So how do you make a donor a lifetime donor? So I hope you'll stay and join us in our next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Arby, Nicole, and Scott. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
being online.
Good, I love it.